if I understand what is my underlying need behind scrolling, how was I feeling just before the scrolling, just before I started scrolling? Maybe I was feeling like overwhelmed. And maybe the need was for some rest. Yeah. Once I understand that, what is driving my behavior, I can make another choice.
This is something that few young girls may be facing, that they've worked extremely hard throughout school and they've finally made it to a well-reputed university and they're striving in all areas, academics, extracurriculars. They're doing well on their exams and they're the class representative. And in their experience, they're putting in a tremendous amount of effort and succeeding because of that. But whenever, they get their scores back and they do well, or whenever they are rewarded for something, someone comes up to them and says, it's because of your good looks. Right?
Yeah.
And that really disturbs them or triggers them into disbelief almost.
Arrow that has come now. Yeah. And we want to see who hit the arrow and what should be done with the other person. But I've got hit.
There are many mental health terminologies which are going around now, which are increasing awareness of mental health issues, but at the same time, there's a lot of labeling going on, or I would say a lot of self-labeling. So things like, I have an anxiety attack, I'm in a toxic environment, OCD, ADHD, and of course trauma as well. But is there benefit to greater awareness of these terms, or are we also using them against ourselves by, people are diagnosing themselves almost. They go and read about these conditions and say, I have this, this, this. That's why I have OCD. Yeah. So how do we look at this issue?
So I don't need to resolve my anxiety in order to live the life I want to live. Yeah. I can have the anxiety and acknowledge it as it comes up, have a way of navigating it, and move towards something that I value and cherish. Despite the fear, despite the anxiety, even though it is there.
How do you go about choosing the right kind of therapist, especially? But even maybe psychologist or psychiatrist. But especially, how do you choose the right kind of therapist if you need help? Namaste, everyone. Welcome to the second podcast of YogEQ. I'm your host, Aman, and we have the privilege today of having a distinguished guest with us, Mrs. Sandy Andrade. She's a renowned psychotherapist with over 25 years of experience, who has done a lot of extensive training in not just psychotherapy, but also trauma, somatics. She has an MBCT from the Center of Mindfulness at the University of California in San Diego, and various other accomplishments. She's also the founder and director of the Just Being Center in Pune, which not just offers therapy sessions, but has trained several therapists, counselors, and worked with several NGOs in areas of trauma and therapy. So Sandy, it's a privilege to speak to you today, and happy to have this conversation.
Yes, good to be here, Raman.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So I just want to begin with, let's start with your journey and how did you get drawn to psychotherapy and becoming a psychotherapist?
Yeah, I think with being a psychotherapist, I think there was always a pull in terms of being reflective and, uh, really actually studying myself and being interested in what was going on within myself, and there was a lot to study there and a lot to navigate. So yes, but I also then didn't really take up psychology after my graduation. I went into another area of journalism, but I came back to it knowing that this was going to be something that was more fulfilling for me. It's like if I can be there for myself as well as the other, that would be something that I would like to do full time. So I went back and studied some more, and then did some more training. Yeah, and actually the burning question for me right from the very start was how does psychology and spirituality come together? And from my own Vipassana meditation practice, I knew the benefits that it was giving me. And I wanted to somehow have a way of bringing those benefits along with looking at the psychological to the people who I was seeing. And that really started a quest of really finding that kind of meeting ground between, these two, which usually people think as opposing disciplines, but they are not.
Right.
They really need to go hand in hand together. And so I think at the Just Being Center for Mindfulness and Presence, I think we found that sweet spot where they meet in just this very human experience, and just meeting ourselves, meeting our experience, meeting our emotions, just here now, just with awareness, bringing in that awareness through mindfulness practice. And that's what we also then teach in our in our 2 courses that we run, which for mental health professionals and others, to just be able to hold space with mindfulness, with presence, really listening in an embodied way from one's whole self to the other, because that's where this deep transformation happens. That's our belief. It's just here, just with this. It's really at a very simple level. It's not very complicated. And yet, to arrive at that simplicity, it requires the work of being with oneself primarily, of being with one's own emotions, and then being able to be there for the other.
Right.
Yeah? Because how else can you know how to or support the other if you don't know how to move through that yourself? Not that you have achieved something. It's work in progress, and that's the other thing, that it also brings you to just your humanness, that you're human, and everyone also has their just their humanity, and that's the connection that we kind of come with, just that human to human contact that is critical, apart from all your theories and skills and techniques and ways of relating.
Right. And how did you merge that with psychology and psychotherapy, which is a huge academic domain, and there's a lot of theories.
Yes.
And how do people balance this?
Yeah. But the theories are also to really support our understanding and how we relate to things. So when we are looking at the application, it's really in terms of like understanding, okay, how do I relate to my experience, and then the different perspectives on that. So of course within psychology, like any other field, you will have many different perspectives and all of them have their validity. Where I'm located and my work is located is more from a mindfulness, presence-based approach, which also includes the body's intelligence, the body's knowing and wisdom, along with what's happening at the level of mind and thoughts. So really to have this kind of holistic perspective, and also the deeper layers of being, because no matter what we are facing, no matter what anyone is facing, the underlying belief is that we are intact and we are whole, just as we are. You don't need to kind of create an improvement, to get to being whole. It's not like we are broken and we have to get whole.
Right.
And that's a major shift. Not that we ask people to do it, but it's in terms of just coming into that inner relationship of just meeting oneself, meeting one's experience with that care, with that understanding, with that intimacy. Yeah. And that's where we sense into our inherent wholeness and beingness.
Right.
Yeah.
But, in today's practical reality in this modern world, people do feel broken. They don't feel whole.
Yes.
Most people.
Yes.
So, looking at that, there are a number of situations that come up that people face. So I would like to ask you a few situations that, people may be facing, and how would you, comment on that as a therapist? So the first situation would be someone, a female, maybe in their mid-30s, who has a family and kids, settled professional. Everything's fine on the outside, but in the recent past, there's this constant irritation, irritability, and bouts of anger and reactive behavior towards certain people that's coming up. And they feel something is off. And they've even tried sitting down with themselves, journaling. But they're not able to understand what is off. There's no external factor which seems to be off. So in this situation, what would you recommend this sort of person does?
Okay. So there are several things here, Aman. One is, I think, a lot of us, whether we are mental health professionals or not, we try to look at just the symptoms and just look at symptom reduction, right? For example, in this case, that I'm just, I'm just feeling this kind of anxiety, and of course it feels unpleasant. And so how do I not feel it? Yeah. But what you're also, in the example that you're sharing, is that this person is not just looking at symptom reduction, but she's also having a sense that something's not right. And this awareness often brings people to therapy and to counseling. Something doesn't feel right. And that much is enough to kind of like begin one's journey. Something like, you don't need to know exactly what is wrong, or that your therapist or somebody you're working with will tell you what is wrong and how to fix yourself, because that would be the symptom reduction. But it is really about, like for this person to just see that maybe I need maybe to sit with someone else and just explore this as to what is it that is going on for me, right? Now, what's happening in the therapeutic environment, right, when one goes for therapy or counseling, is that at a very, very basic level, as therapists, we are really listening to the other, yeah, and really trying to kind of like find out from the other through what they're saying, yeah, what is it that is bothering them? What is that underlying thing? What is it? In what situations maybe they feel anxious? Where does it come up? So one, you're working with awareness, right? So irrespective of any therapeutic modality, a therapist will bring in this, or a counselor will bring in the awareness, whether it's at a cognitive level, somatic level, emotional level, but all through there is this kind of shining that light of awareness on spots and areas that I on my own may not be able to see. Right. And we often are able to see something more clearly when we are with the other. Not because the other is pointing it out to us, but it's just this kind of relating, which is non-judgmental, which is allowing, which is accepting, that's allowing this also awareness to come in and say, hey, yeah, I think here's where it comes up. Right. Okay. And therefore this kind of feeling of dissatisfaction, something's off, is really a cue for the person, if like in this example they're following it, that kind of leads them to what is it that I really need and require in this situation. Right. Okay. And sometimes also pointing out to that maybe there is something that has been trying to emerge. Yeah. It's trying to emerge, and that's not a bad thing. Right? Maybe something that has been underlying wants to come forth, okay, and wants to be met and heard and understood, so that the person can come into their inherent sense of wholeness. Right. Okay. So we listen to what is it, what is the distress. Not try to fix it, not try to avoid it, not try to make it better, but actually that distress, that anxiety, that holds the key.
It's telling you something.
It's telling you something. It's telling you something really important if we can listen to it. And that's often, while we can do that by ourselves, it is very helpful when we do that with another.
Right.
Now, if we had environments, right? If we had environments where we were just heard and listened to, and we could just kind of like just say how it is for us, and there is no judging, and there is allowing this natural intelligence and knowing would surface. Right. Unfortunately, more and more we don't have those environments.
Right.
So while I do very much endorse that there is the one-on-one support, but we also need to create communities, families, a community is anything that, 2 or 3 people are together, that it creates that environment of safety and care and connection.
Honest conversations.
Honest conversations, and that allow that.
Right.
Yeah.
So this person would have the choice to, if they can find such an environment, they could try sharing there. But if they're feeling that they are not finding such an environment, then they can go ahead and try to find a therapist.
Yes, and it can be both. It doesn't have to be either or.
Right.
Right? I can have an environment which is relatively supportive, but there may also be things that maybe even in that environment that I cannot see. That in this very, I would say, a very sacred space that is created in counseling and in therapy, where I can just be with my experience and things and just see it without the other person, coming in too much. Yeah.
Right.
So yes, so both can suffice. So I don't think it's an either or that, if I have a supportive environment, I don't need
a
therapy.
therapist.
I think everyone needs therapy. Because it's not about just, fixing oneself or when something is wrong, go to someone. But yes, I just want more clarity, perhaps, about where am I, what's happening for me. And I would like to do that with the support of the other. Yeah.
And as you said, vice versa, even if you have a therapist, you still need other environments where you are able to be honest and share, right? Otherwise, you're again secluding yourself, isolating a part of you have only one when you feel you have only one window to share.
Yeah, but I think even that, if you have even one person, one spot, I think that is good enough.
To begin
with. Not just to begin with, it's just good enough.
Just good enough.
It's just good enough to just have, like, when we do teenagers, I was just at a teenagers retreat, we had this. And there's one exercise that we did with them in terms of who's your go-to person.
Right.
Right? And because that's really important. You're going, as a teenager, you're going through so many ups and downs. You are met with so many challenges. And you need someone that you feel, at least you have a felt sense that you can trust, that you can go to. And if you do go to that person, that you don't have a, negative experience of that, or you don't feel like your trust has been shattered, right? Because you're sharing something very important. And so when these teenagers did and it happens in many, many retreats, often it is found that some of them will say, I don't have anyone. And now this is true for all of us.
Right.
Yeah. We work with adults as well, and they say, I can't think of a single person with whom I can feel safe. So having one person, that's really big. Having that space, very often clients have this, that it's just that coming back to that one session, this one spot, where then they're building their capacity, right? But I know that I have this one spot I can go to no matter what is happening in my life. Yeah. One trusted space.
Right.
So just coming back, but if we do not have that person, like with these teenagers, then we look at in terms of, but is there a place where you feel safe, right? Is there, it could be an animal with whom you feel safe.
Right.
Because it's not so much that I need to talk to someone, it's that felt sense of safety, like even everything in us and even our, at a neural level as well, that there is a felt sense of safety in the body that we feel. Not that I know this person is safe, but you feel it. You have a sense of it. You have a sense of care. And often these things don't require words. And that's why with animals it also works. With nature it works. Like I can just go, and many of us do this intuitively. like I'm feeling down, or like in your example where something is not feeling right, and maybe I go to a place that makes me, just gives me a sense of maybe calm, safety, where I feel connected, and then I come into my own resourcefulness.
Right.
Okay, so we need that. So if it is not a person, it's all right. Like we don't have those safe places as yet. But we can have maybe a place, we can have an animal, we can have maybe something, for some people it's believing in something larger than themselves,
Right.
like a spiritual belief. And like that holds, that's that resource, that's that coming back to, as I'm trying to find a way within myself, the building of capacity.
So I'd like to share another situation. This is something that few young girls may be facing, that they've worked extremely hard throughout school and they've finally made it to a well-reputed university, and they're striving in all areas, academics, extracurriculars. They're doing well on their exams and they're the class representative. And in their experience, they're putting in a tremendous amount of effort and succeeding because of that. But whenever, they get their scores back and they do well, or whenever they are rewarded for something, someone comes up to them and says, it's because of your good looks. Right?
Yeah.
And that really disturbs them or triggers them into disbelief almost, and almost starts making them question that are they being rewarded for their effort or because of the way they look.
Yeah.
So in this sort of a situation, what would you recommend?
Yeah. Again, like I think earlier we spoke about, that one of the key things is having an awareness that something is not feeling right. Like you don't need to know exactly what it is, but just this kind of like sense, right? That's one big thing. The second bit that we have been also talking about and is applicable over here is that how does our sense of self form?
Right.
Okay. And our sense of self forms in relationship, always in relationship with the other. It's like almost, and this is like how we develop our sense of self. Even as babies, as children, that's how we develop our sense of self, our psychological sense of self, right? And it's like the other is acting as the mirror for that, right? Through which we kind of recognize something in ourselves. That's why those environments need to be, that they are important. The environments of care, of connection, of really somebody being sensitive enough to see someone, to listen to someone, to ask, is this, you don't seem yourself today, is there something wrong? These very gentle questions that come from care, but because there is a noticing, right? There is an awareness that is there. And that's when we start to also see something in ourselves, right? So we might feel like when somebody asks us what's going on, we may feel recognized, we may feel seen. When somebody's listening to us, we feel heard. These are very basic and absolutely important kind of givens for really flourishing as into who we are, that we need to receive. Now, unfortunately, we don't really receive this. Yeah? Not because it's anyone's fault, because the people around us have also not received it. Right? So they are just doing the best that they can in the in the way that they know how, like maybe just showing care by, have you eaten, have you slept, have you, done everything, and that's the care that is being shown, which is good enough, but it does not meet at an emotional level. Right. Now, in the example that you're giving, where there are these people who've like really worked for themselves, but they are not receiving this from the outside. Now, what's happening to their sense of self? Now, two scenarios. One, let's assume that they have been in an environment growing up where relatively it has been this kind of safe, holding kind of environment.
Right.
Now they are met with this situation where they are given this kind of like feedback, or like it's almost dismissing, right? They are efforts. Yeah. Now, if I have this kind of relatively strong sense of self that has been formed because of these environments that I have been in, then I may get upset about this, but I may also rely on something within me that knows, okay, I'm okay.
Right.
Yeah. I think I'm okay.
Right. You've been in a safe space where there is a space where people also have given you credit and given you validation for what you've
So
done.
that is already part of you.
Right.
Okay? Because the voices of other people tend to then become our own voice.
Right.
So this is something that when we are working with parents and that like really, what are you saying and how are you saying it? And it's not the intention, but how is your child receiving it? Because that is becoming their inner template. Now this inner template becomes our own voice in our head. Now if I've received these messages that I'm seen, I'm heard, I'm capable, I'm okay, right? If I've received this at a subliminal level in a variety of ways, then when this comes to me, I may get affected, but I will be able to find my ground much easier. Okay?
Right.
It may come to me also how I may want to tackle this situation. Right? So the resources and the capacity become more available. Now you take another scenario and the assumption that I've not been in this environment that has been safe and caring where I've received these messages. Now I am faced with these statements that are coming at me, that are dismissing my efforts. Internally, I'm already on shaky ground. Maybe I have a very critical voice that is now my own, which I've heard from other people. Very simple things like, why are you doing it in this particular way? Why not this way? Somebody always questioning you. And that leads to an inner kind of like, where it becomes our voice. We can actually hear ourselves say that to ourselves later on in life.
The inner critic.
The inner critic, right? And so when we are met then with this dismissal from other people about our abilities, we get more shaken up.
Right.
Right? And we find it harder to find our ground. But we can also find our ground with support and come back into our inner resourcefulness, which has not been lost, okay? Which has been there before all these comments started, coming at us. So we can find that ground at any point of time, but we will need more help and more support with that.
Right.
Yeah. So what can these people do? Now I'm feeling shaky with this kind of thing, is that often in therapy we don't kind of give solutions. So it's hard to say, okay, what does this person do in this situation, right? But in this situation, one is to really acknowledge now if something has come at me, I am hit by it. Yeah. To really recognize that I am hit. Something has hit me hard. I've got hurt. I am upset. That would be the first step to really just acknowledge how it is right now. Not to sugarcoat it, not to give an explanation. Maybe all of that is true. Maybe I should have, I should not take these things to heart. Many people will give this advice, right? I should just believe in myself. Yeah, all of that doesn't help at that point of time.
Right.
All that kind of talking. But what we really need to be really honest with ourselves and say that I'm hurt here. That remark hurt me. Or I'm feeling shaken by it. Yeah. So just that acknowledgement, that awareness that, yes, this is how it is right now. Now, after that, then what? Right? So I have this awareness and I know I'm hurt. But if I know I'm hurt, I may have more choice as to what I want to do with it. Yeah. So it doesn't go into just somebody said something, I got hurt. There's some unconscious kind of reaction that happens, or I go do something to myself or to someone else, right? But there is a possibility of conscious choice of how do I take care of myself in this moment. Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
Because what I've heard is in this sort of situation, generally the first reaction again is anger, and the energy gets focused on responding, with intensity to the person who is falsely accusing you. But after that, there's also this remorse about why am I getting angry, and it's a whole reactive cycle. And then you don't feel good. That's when you feel something is off here. So, and I've received this question that how do I respond? Because what someone is saying I feel is unjust, and if I don't respond, that's not appropriate.
Yeah. So this action, what is the right action? What is the wise action that needs to be taken? And maybe some action is needed. Sometimes non-action is also an action, right? And how do we discern this, right? How do we know what is the right action? And what do we do with this emotion that has come up now? Like you said, anger.
And it's all mixed up. It's all...
Yeah. And maybe the first step is one that I know, like I said, I've got hit, I've reacted, there's a reaction that has come up within me, right? And I can pause with it before doing anything else. Like just a short pause. And because of the mindfulness background and the somatic background, what we really practice, like with clients, with students, what we really practice is just the simple kind of sense of just grounding, just feeling your feet on the ground, just feeling your seat. Yeah, very simple. Just come into the anchor of the body, or come into some other anchor. Yeah, but you need the pause where there is some space between this. There is like some reaction, some feeling, and then there's some action, or there's some more thoughts, because otherwise it's this kind of continuous loop that we find ourselves in. So that pause in some way becomes important. So finding another anchor, finding another ground, not going with the thoughts immediately or that feeling, but just pausing, even if it is for a short while. Okay? You can use external anchors, like maybe I just listen to the sounds, or I just look around in the room, or, some people find it helpful just to do something more tactile, like touch, right? But take a pause and then acknowledge the feeling. Yeah.
So this is a live situation, someone has said something. When they say something, you should take a pause.
Take a pause.
You shouldn't respond.
Yeah, if you're feeling activated, you're not feeling your resourceful self, it is better that the response can wait.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then?
And then you tend to yourself first. So it's like like we are saying, there is this arrow that has come now. Yeah. And we want to see who hit the arrow and what should be done with the other person. But I've got hit. So
you need to get first aid.
Yeah, I can tend to it. I can take care of this that has come up. Then I can see, okay, how do I want to respond to this?
Right.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit more, go a little bit deeper about, how you can continue to stay with what you're feeling.
Yeah.
And as you were sharing that, take a pause.
Yes.
And, maybe do something.
Yeah.
Feel more grounded.
Yeah.
But again, my thoughts begin. So how do I stay there?
Yes. Yeah. So it's not about pushing the thoughts away or suppressing the thoughts or not thinking about the situation. That's not what the pause is meant for. The pause is more for breaking this very automatic loop of thinking, feeling, reacting that we find ourselves in. So it's just creating a little space there.
Right.
Yeah. And then there is the acknowledgement of the feeling that we were talking about. So first we said there's just an awareness, that there's a reaction. So sometimes we catch the reaction when it happens, sometimes we catch it in retrospect. Both are okay, as long as you catch it, right? Yeah, so as long as you're aware of it. So at whatever moment you kind of become aware of it, that's the time when we can pause and say, oh, and be curious about what happened there. Something happened here. What is it that happened? And then there is the acknowledgement of the feeling. Now here, when there is an acknowledgement of the feeling, I also hear many people say that, I know how I'm feeling. But knowing how you're feeling and feeling the feeling is not the same thing.
Right.
Yeah. So I can know how I'm feeling, as in have an intellectual understanding of it. I can analyze my emotions, all day long, but I may still not feel the feeling. Okay. And actually sometimes over-intellectualizing, over-analyzing is also a way of moving away from the feeling.
Right.
Okay. So it's a way of protecting ourselves from feeling vulnerable. Because feeling that anger, that hurt, that sadness, that grief makes us feel vulnerable. And often the kind of messages we hear around us is to be strong, which means don't feel vulnerable. But actually there's a lot of strength in just allowing this vulnerability. Now, it's not so simple to just touch into the vulnerability, and it's often good reason why we are not going directly there and having a way of, thinking about it, or distractions, or reacting, or whatever, but having a way of not touching these vulnerable, deep places within us, right? Sometimes there's a fear that if I touch that, I won't be able to handle it. It will be too overpowering. I will get swept by this. Now, this is also a very legitimate fear, right? Because maybe in the past, I have experienced that when I felt anger or I felt hurt or I felt grief, that it was too much. And that's how we have learned an intelligent way of dealing with those emotions, which were okay at that point of time. But they don't serve us anymore right now. Right now, then, if we have the same way of coping with our feelings, then it interferes in our own relating to others and in our relating to ourselves. Yeah. It also, we cannot close our heart, just, okay, there was one door closed, the rest open. It closes down. So our heart, our openness, our genuineness, our curiosity, all of it is then in a compromised mode. Right?
So you think in this situation, if I took a pause or I came back home, I realized later on, I took a pause, came back home, I started journaling about it. And something that's common is the emotions wheel, right?
Yeah.
Try to identify what emotion was I feeling. So all of that could, you mean, not be helpful? It could be over intellectualizing.
All of that is helpful in bringing awareness that there is something that is going on, right? Now, how do I be with this feeling? How can I feel this feeling? And the way to feel this feeling is through the body, because our emotions also reside in the body. Yeah. There are thoughts about it, there are beliefs about situations that also kind of add to how we are feeling, okay, or can determine how we are feeling. But when, like I said, when we are hit, now there is hurt. Maybe there are beliefs that I need to look at, but not at that point of time. Now, how do I take care and just see this hurt? So I just like to offer maybe a somatic way of just being with the feeling in the body. And so when we are thinking about the situation or the feeling, just ask yourself, like, as I'm thinking that, as I'm aware of that, how am I feeling this in the body? And bring attention in the body. Maybe I feel a tightness in the chest. Maybe I feel a heaviness in the head. But there is some somatic indication, there is something that's happening in the body as well. Now, being with this feeling sensation in the body can be one way of directly touching into this feeling and emotion and giving it space, rather than going with it in the narrative of, what happened, how did it happen, and all of that. So we shift the attention to being with the feeling sensation in the body.
So you're shifting from outward thinking
Yes.
to now just being with the sensations of the body.
Yes, just being with that feeling sensation in the body. And we can bring in, of course there is awareness, but we can bring in touch. Now let's relate this to the relationality that we were talking about, of how we need that holding, right? And when we bring in touch, now our brain isn't recognizing it as, the amygdala is not responding to it as your touch, my touch. It's just responding to touch. And this emotional center of the brain, right, it begins to calm down. So at a physiological level, there's a lot that is happening with the touch. At a psychological level, it's like something in me is receiving this touch, and something in me is also giving this touch. Both there.
Right.
The giving and the receiving, both happening internally. So this, what we were saying, that can happen in a relational space, that someone's there. This
or
is
a safe space.
Or a safe space. This is happening internally, that someone's there, which means you're there for you, for this place that is hurting, for this place that is angry. And so with conscious awareness, we can just bring in, like feeling, and we can just do this of just feeling the warmth of that touch. So it's not in terms of just trying to soothe ourselves and make ourselves feel better, but it's like, how would you be with a crying child? You would sit down with them and you would like really say, I'm here, it's okay. Yeah. And so you just feel the warmth of the touch. Yeah. And be with this sense of touch long enough. Like, let the body, mind experience this holding. So it's almost like a holding that is happening, right? And now you can bring in touch wherever, maybe you feel some tightness in the belly. Let your hands just rest there, or here, or on the head. Yeah. So just bringing in that sense of touch just for a while, and just bringing your attention more downwards towards the ground. So often, by default, when we feel something, many people experience a heaviness in the head, or like a headache, because we are so used to going to our head to try to solve issues.
Right. That's how we're trained in general in society, in school.
Yes. And so we have to have a way of, coming down and also trusting the wisdom of the whole body mind. Yeah. And allowing this emotion to flow through the whole body.
And when you're with the sensations, at that point, what is happening with your mind? Are you just keeping a focus on the sensations? Are you looking for something? Because usually people are, if you're still in an emotional state, and you're looking for some cue to understand yourself.
Yeah.
So are you staying away from that and just being with the touch?
Yeah, you're just being with the touch. So think of it like I am with a very good friend who is maybe grieving, feeling hurt. And I'm just coming in with my compassionate presence and just sitting with them. I'm just being with them. So that's the same thing that we're turning it around towards ourselves, as I'm just being with myself, just with this touch, for however much one can, right? And then, of course, naturally, the movement of the mind will happen. There will be more thoughts. Maybe the intensity comes down, or maybe not. And then we just see in terms of, in this moment, how is it best that I can take care of myself? How can I nurture myself? What's a nurturing act of kindness that I can offer to myself? And these little acts of kindness towards ourselves then build this inner capacity of really turning towards ourselves with that sense of compassion and care, right? And when we receive it from others, it also builds our capacity to know how to meet ourselves like that. So that works both. Yeah? You work on the inside, like creating that inner environment, but you also need to receive from an outer environment. You need to feel it.
Stay there.
Yeah. Not just to stay there, to also taste it. That this is how it feels, like just kindness.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you stay there as long as you can, and then you move toward some act of kindness or finding a safe space where you can...
if you need that. Sometimes this much will be enough. Yeah. Not that my problem is solved, but I'm in a clearer space.
But the important thing is you're not trying to understand your emotions.
Yes.
You're just being with what you're feeling in your sensations in
Yes.
your body.
Yes.
You don't have to come out of this feeling like you understood why something happened
Yeah.
or what emotion you felt.
Or
You just
now that
experienced.
it's magically gone away.
Right.
Because I've come in with touch. No, sometimes these places need a lot more, holding and care, and we can, not that we have to be with it all the time, so we can go and live our lives in what we need to do. And sometimes when the emotion comes up, we can come back and sit with it. Yeah. So we are not trying to solve this now, and that I never feel this way again. If it comes up, it's okay, because I have a way and I know how to be with it. So I'm not afraid of my human experiences. Yeah.
And we have to let go of this idea that we need this resolved and done with,
Yeah.
which is another common response that
And which is,
it's negative, it's bothering me, I need to get done with this.
Yes. Oh, I always need to feel positive. We don't. I mean, that's life. And emotions come and go and they move.
Because another question that many people have is that when you even become aware of your emotional patterns or triggers, that awareness doesn't mean it's not going to happen again, right? So you become aware there's this tendency, and then you see it happen again and again.
Yeah.
And often one doesn't know what to do, how much to engage with it or disengage.
Yes.
Because at many points it also feels like it's stopping me from doing my chores, from living my life.
Yeah. So I don't need to resolve my anxiety in order to live the life I want to live. Yeah. I can have the anxiety and acknowledge it as it comes up, have a way of navigating it, and move towards something that I value and cherish. Despite the fear, despite the anxiety, even though it is there. Right? A small step. So I can keep taking these small steps in that direction, as well as develop greater capacities for being with my emotions. So it's not like I need to have this whole capacity and then I will be ready to kind of move into the world and be who I am. I can be who I am, and maybe in small pockets. Yeah. And that creates also capacity. So bringing in things at a behavioral level is also equally important. That what is the small step that I would like to do? For example, if I'm always postponing things because I'm anxious, right? And maybe that's something very important that is there. What's that small one step that I can do? Not solve this whole anxiety now, acknowledge it like the way we've said it. And now what's that one step? One tiny step. So that also kind of creates space that, okay, I can kind of move. So we also call it developing the psychological flexibility.
Okay.
Yeah. Like being able to move, right? Being able to move with things.
Not be stuck in one.
Yeah. And if we are stuck, then to be with that stuckness, to kind of like see what is it really about and what's that one small step. Like what is it that I want to do? What is the stuckness really pointing out towards? Maybe it's pointing out towards some fear, maybe towards some desire or wanting something. Right? Yeah.
I want to ask you, if you don't do this, which, many people are not, and there are many things in our environment which keep us distracted. There's scrolling, there's unnecessary conversation, there's a lot of things. Some unnecessary things, and then there are other things also, like exercise or even yoga. So I practice classical hatha yoga, where you use posture and breath to change the way you feel.
Yeah.
And I've been doing it long enough to know that actually the way I feel transforms, and over time it's made me a grounded person.
Yes.
And allows me to be with emotions. But whatever you choose to do, if you're not being with that emotion, and do you end up suppressing it? And what is the consequence of not being with the emotion?
Yeah. I'm also glad you kind of brought this up in terms of like there are practices that we can do, like you mentioned yoga, which inherently kind of brings us in touch, like we said, with this inherent wholeness. And that's really developing our inner resourcefulness, like really creating the strong ground. And then I will need to encounter my emotions, right? So I don't think there is an escaping of that. So sometimes because it's like they're trying to find a way to express and
Find
to
expression.
tell us, something that is going on. So they will find it will find expression in other ways, right? Maybe in behaviors, maybe in the psychosomatic, maybe physically, but there will be some expression of it because it's trying to be known. Yeah.
But if you do something like scrolling or whatever, which is largely a distraction, then how does it play out? It basically comes back into your thoughts at a later point, where it remains unresolved.
It can come up in many different ways. Yeah. But see, even with the distractions, to what extent am I using the distractions? We all use distractions. I knew someone who had who was grieving, and he had lost a family member, and he said for 6 months he was just numbing himself out watching TV. Now he needed to numb himself out, but then later on he had to also feel his emotions. So we can trust our intelligence, that the body mind's intelligence, that it knows what to do and when and in what order. When it becomes problematic is that when this habitual way just becomes the way, right? So if I'm scrolling, then I'm always engaged in scrolling, and it becomes a way in which I am coping with my emotion. But sometimes I may need that downtime, that distance, to just kind of like have myself. Now it's a choice point. If I understand what is my underlying need behind scrolling, how was I feeling just before the scrolling, just before I started scrolling? Maybe I was feeling like overwhelmed, and maybe the need was for some rest. Once I understand that, what is driving my behavior, I can make another choice. Maybe there are many different and more healthier ways of resting, right? And I can choose differently. I can choose another form and form another habit, around how I choose to rest at the end of the day. So numbing does not need to be the only option, but to understand what was numbing achieving for you. What was it trying to do? Wants to give you a little more space, wants some downtime, something in you wants a downtime, wants to rest. So once we understand that, then we have more choice. Then we can choose our behavior. That's the flexibility that we're talking about.
Right. So it's really about employing that choice, that when you need to do what, that discernment.
Yes.
And being able to do that consciously.
Yes. Yeah. And so we don't need to judge our behaviors. We just need to get curious about it. Why am I doing what I'm doing at this point of time? What happened just before that? What was the feeling? The feeling is the cue. Because the feeling is pointing out to what is it that is needed in that moment. Yeah. Which can come through many different behaviors, and some of those behaviors don't serve us. And so we can then make a choice of just choosing something that meets that same need, but differently. Yeah. So the need for rest can also be, I'm just sitting outside in the garden, just with my cup of tea or whatever, and just listening to the sound of birds and just not doing anything for 10 minutes. That could also be rest.
Right.
Yeah. It can serve the same purpose. It can be reading a book. It can be having a conversation with whoever is around and having a lighter conversation. It might be going for a walk. So the choices are many, but we feel that...
The choices are between distancing, or you could do capacity building.
Yeah.
Right? Something like yoga or spiritual practice does capacity building.
Yes.
Other things could be distancing. But at some point, your body itself tells you when you need to feel these things, and at some point you feel those sensations and be with them.
Yes. Yes. In small doses, increasing our capacity to feel more directly. Yeah.
I just wanted to ask you a little bit about the many mental health terminologies which are going around now, which are increasing awareness of mental health issues, but at the same time, there's a lot of labeling going on, or I would say a lot of self-labeling. So things like, I have an anxiety attack, I'm in a toxic environment, OCD, ADHD, and of course trauma as well. But is there benefit to greater awareness of these terms, or are we also using them against ourselves by, people are diagnosing themselves almost. They go and read about these conditions and say, I have this, this, this. That's why I have OCD.
Yeah.
So how do we look at this issue?
So, in one way, like you're saying, it's a good thing that there is increased awareness even about, that there could be something more that I'm experiencing that needs attention. And if one has a doubt about it, one can always seek that professional help and an opinion as to what I'm experiencing. What is it that I'm experiencing? And share that with a professional to really know whether it is OCD, whether it is a clinical condition or not. And I don't think we really need to label ourselves. Sometimes it's helpful to know that, okay, whatever I am facing, there is a name for it. That sometimes gives a lot of relief, right? Like I didn't know that all of these things is a certain condition. And sometimes the labeling does not really serve any purpose except for narrowing our sense of a self and identity that, oh, I have this, but maybe even if I do have a certain condition, I am much more than that condition. I'm suffering from something. I have a certain condition that I live with, right? That I'm trying to navigate. Just like we have many other maybe physical conditions, like I have diabetes, but I don't go around saying I'm diabetic, I'm diabetic.
Yeah.
So
and even if there are various grades of it, you could be pre-diabetic,
Exactly.
You may not be diabetic.
Yes. So there's a whole range which we know from medical intervention. Same with a psychological condition. One can know it through the professional input that can come in, and that we don't need to just define ourselves whether we do have that condition or not. Maybe we just have some, you know, all of these. Like when you're studying psychology, you feel like you have all of these. This also I have. This is a very common.
At some point in time, you experience certain things.
Exactly, because it's all on a continuum. Yeah. So what we are calling anxiety, for example, don't we kind of, all of us, at some point of time, get into really overthinking and worrying about the future or what's going to happen? So we do have all of these tendencies within us by virtue of being human. It's the same human mind, right? But what we are calling a clinical condition is the severity, is the duration, it is the impact that it is having on the person's life, and then therefore the need for more professional help with that and support from that, not just from one person, but maybe from, many mental health professionals.
So how severely it's impacting your daily life. And what you need to do is one important factor.
Yes.
And if someone does believe they have one of these conditions, what is the right approach? Do they go to a psychologist, psychiatrist, psychotherapist?
So a psychiatrist and a clinical psychologist are able to kind of help you with the diagnosis and knowing what the condition is about. Therapists, counselors are able to support you in that emotional work that is needed, that also underlies all of these kind of like conditions, and therefore I said it's a combination of people working together. But if you want to know about whether this is what I'm undergoing, you approach a clinical psychologist or you approach a psychiatrist.
How do you go about choosing the right kind of therapist, especially, but even maybe psychologist or psychiatrist, but especially how do you choose the right kind of therapist if you need help?
How do you feel with the person? In the sense of, so at one level, there can be all these accomplishments and skills and all of that. But ultimately, the real ground of healing is that relational aspect to things. So, like we were talking about that safety, that inner felt sense of safety. Do I feel that when I'm speaking to this person? Do I feel a sense of trust? I feel seen, I feel heard, I feel welcomed as I am, and that I have this kind of ground that I can go back to. There is that sense. Yes, then it's a right fit. Yeah.
And how long do you give it? Because I have heard of situations where, you go to a therapist who's accomplished and you kind of feel you don't vibe with them. They don't fully understand you.
Yeah.
So if I feel that they don't understand me in the first session, do I walk away and look for a different one?
Yeah. And if you find yourself walking away from many, you got to kind of like look at, okay, what's happening here?
Right.
Maybe it is my pattern, something within me that's not able to kind of trust, right? But even if you like have a first session and it doesn't, you want to give at least 4 or 5 sessions to really know whether this is the right fit, whether this is suitable for me right now with this person, and then to make a choice. Because counseling, therapeutic work, it's also like a slow process. It takes time. So it's not going to get into kind of like quick fix. I have this one session and now all my problems are resolved and I feel completely different. Because what therapy and counseling is really helping you to do is really coming in touch with yourself, being aware, touching into your own resourcefulness and capacities, and your potential of being who you are in the world. So there is a certain intimacy then you're left with within. And that can be, once you have that, then it doesn't matter what you're faced with, because you have that sense of an inner intimacy and okayness that no matter what, I can move through.
Right.
Yeah.
So as long as you feel safe,
Yep.
you should give it that much time.
Yeah.
Because you can go into a therapy session, many things can arise within, and you may be feeling off because you're experiencing all these emotions.
Yeah.
But as long as you're feeling safe, stick with it at least for 4 or 5 sessions.
But when we talk about safety, it doesn't feel safe to feel all these feelings.
Right.
Yeah. But there is a holding in that. Like, so it's not like I'm feeling very safe and comfortable in approaching it. There will be discomfort in the therapy space because I'm encountering things that I have so far not had a look at. But the discomfort feels okay. Like it feels held. Like I know that, that there is the other to be there with me. So it's not an absence of discomfort. And in that discomfort, I may feel like a little not safe because it doesn't feel safe to kind of enter into these very tender states. There's a lot of, we have learned a way of protecting against opening the heart. And we're opening our heart again. So, of course, it's terrifying. Yeah.
Right.
But it still feels okay. Yeah.
My last question would be, is it as effective to have a therapy session online as it is in person, or is there a difference?
So for the kind of approach that I use and I'm familiar with, which is very somatic, which is really working moment to moment with the person, yes, online can work as effectively as in person because you do feel with the other and you're attuned. But it also actually depends on the client's preferences as well. Whether the person prefers a face-to-face contact, where that gives more of the reassurance.
Right.
And sometimes people prefer the online because it gives them that sense of reassurance and safety that, okay, I don't have to meet you, really. And I can stay behind my screen. And to begin with, that may feel like, okay, I can do this.
So it's really your own personal preference that you have to discover.
Yes.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Sandy. It's really been a very educational discussion for me, and I hope for all of our viewers.
Yeah.
And would love to get some more questions from them and maybe forward them to you.
Yeah, sure.
In the future.
Yeah, I really enjoyed being part of this conversation, and thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So guys, if you like the content that we are creating and it's adding any value to you, then please support us by liking, subscribing, and sharing it with your friends and family.
And there are a lot of costs involved in making these podcasts happen. If you would like to contribute, then please comment, contribute, and we'll share a link with you. Thank you.
Thank you.